Hi, this is Keith Scott with Marshall Business Solutions. Welcome to our video on parent communication. Now, we're going to discuss how to inform your parents so that you can ultimately keep students longer. We're going to begin our video today by going over the goals for the video. After I've given you the bullet points of all the goals, then what we'll do next is I'll go into each of these goals in detail for you. So be prepared to take plenty of notes. Now, our first goal is to identify the reasons that kids quit. Now, this is not all the reasons that kids quit. These are some of the reasons that kids quit that we can actually help work on with our parent communication. Now, the next thing is our frequency of communication. So, how frequent should we communicate with the students and with their parents? And then the methods of communication. So, I'm going to list out different ways that you can get in touch with your parents to keep them informed about what's happening at your martial arts school. Now, professionalism is the key with all this communication. You have to have a very professional look, good grammar, good spelling, all of that type of thing, so that your message doesn't get lost in the fact that it looks bad or that you have bad grammar or bad spelling. The next thing that we're going to discuss is how Marshall Business Solutions can help. How Marshall Business Solutions can help you have a more professional image, communicate more frequently with your students and parents so that you can keep them informed and keep them training longer. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over each of these goals in detail, so make sure that you're prepared to take plenty of notes. The first thing that we want to do is we want to identify the reasons that kids quit. Now again, these are not all the reasons that kids quit training. These are just some of the reasons that they quit that are associated with communication, and we can keep them from quitting by keeping them informed. The first one is culture shock. You're in this environment, this martial arts world that you've created at your martial arts school all day, every day. So the culture is normal to you. The parents and the students, they just don't understand, so you have to educate them about how everything works at your school. Now, people that do not participate in events do not train as long as your students that do participate in your events. So if that student is just showing up to class 1 or 2 days a week, every week, and they're not participating in any of your events, they just haven't bought into the whole culture of your school, the fact that your school is a place for them to meet friends and everything. So you want to make sure that they're active in your events and they'll continue training longer. Also, people quit because they're confused about how testing works. They don't understand when testing is. They don't know what they're supposed to wear to testing. They don't just understand the whole process, how many stripes they're supposed to have, when they get belts, the testing fees. There's just a lot of things that they may not understand about testing. So you want to inform them up front so that they don't get too intimidated. Of course, we want them to take testing seriously, and we want them to be eager to perform their best, but we don't want them to just have abject fear about testing. Now, talking about fear, a lot of people quit because of sparring. They either get hurt in sparring, or just even before that, they have a fear of sparring. So we have to educate them about, what belt level they're allowed to start sparring at, the amount of contacts that they're allowed to, have it in sparring. So we want them to be reassured that there's this whole there's a process of how they get introduced to sparring, and that their child is not going to get hurt. Now, upgrade programs. If you have upgrades at your school, which you should, a lot of parents hear rumors about the length of your upgrade programs, how much they cost. Instead of another parent informing them of your upgrade programs, you want to make sure that you educate them through proper communication. Now, how often should you communicate with your students and your parents? And, a lot of people will have the initial phone call, of course, and, you tell them whatever you tell them about your school. And then hopefully you have some type of a starter course or 2-lesson trial program that your students go through whenever they initially start at your martial arts school. Now, we've found that for some martial arts schools, this is really where the communication ends. And what I mean by that is, of course, you say hey to your parents whenever they come in the door and out the door for classes and stuff, but actually sitting down and really face-to-face, one-on-one, and explaining the way things work at your school. This is where it stops for a lot of martial arts schools, and that just can't happen. We got to make sure we keep going from there. Now, the way it works is the more students you have, the more frequency you need to have in your level of communication. So, if you've got 50 students at your school, it's really easy to hang out before or after class and talk to people, and you just, know everything about them. They know everything about you and about the school, and everything's good. But at some point, when you start growing and you start getting more than that 50 parents, once you get to have 100 students, 200 students, 300 students, you have to continually add more and more ways to communicate with the students and with the parents. Now, here's some methods of communication. Of course, you can use email to communicate to everyone. In place of email, some people are using social media sites like Facebook to send direct messages to individual parents or to your whole school. We also have phone calls. You can, again, direct them to specific people or to your whole student body. Those phone calls can be for upcoming events to let them know about them. We can also talk to them if they've been missing class for our missing in action calls to make sure we get them to come back in. We can do 2, 4, 6-week calls. We can also have a new student orientation. Now, these are just some of the things that we can do to help communicate with them. These aren't all the ways that you can communicate, but what we're talking about is when someone first enrolls at your martial arts school, some things that you can do to communicate with them in the very beginning so that they're not going to want to quit. Now, we can also do upgrade conferences once we get past this initial stage to let them know about how they can continue with your program long-term on their journey to get their black belt. And then we also have student newsletters. And we're going to spend some time talking about student newsletters today because this is one of our most important methods of communication that we have. Now, with our student newsletters, again, the more students we have to increase the methods that we distribute our newsletter each and every month. Now, if you don't currently have a student newsletter, that's okay. I'm going to show you what should be in your student newsletter. I'm going to show you a really easy way that Martial Business Solutions can help you with your student newsletter. Now, you can just print a physical hard copy of the newsletter and hand it out to every single one of your students and parents. I know that we can do all these other things with the newsletters electronically now, but I still really believe in that printed hard copy of the newsletter. Now, we can also take our newsletter and you can post it on your website to get students and parents to go to the website and read it there. That's a really good idea. You can also email your newsletter to your parents. And that it can be an email that actually has a newsletter in it, or it can be an email that just has a link to go back to your website to view your newsletter. Either one of those is fine. Now, your student newsletter should be 4 pages in length or more. So if it's too short, there's not really enough value in it. And if it's too long, then, it becomes like reading a book. So, 4, 6, 8 pages at the most for your newsletter. But, the 4-page length is a pretty good size unless you just have a lot of events, maybe some tournament results, something really big that you need to put in there. Now, your newsletter has to come out on the 1st of each month. Not a day before, not a day or two later. It's got to come out on the 1st of each month. Okay? The only exceptions I can really see that is if there's, like if the 1st is on a weekend, if the 1st is on like a Saturday or a Sunday, then maybe you come out with a newsletter on Monday instead. So, but typically it needs to come out on the 1st of every single month. Now, I'm going to discuss some of the content for your newsletter. Having a newsletter but having the wrong content in there doesn't really do you very much good. And it doesn't do the parents very much good either. The point of the newsletter should be to communicate with your students and parents. So you should have information about your upcoming events. Have the date, the time, all that good kind of stuff, just the facts. But also you need to tell them what's going to happen at your events. You have to sell them on the idea of the events. So these articles for your upcoming events should be anywhere from typically a quarter-page article on your events to a half-page. If it's just some huge event and it needs a lot of explanation, I could see going, a full page, but very, very rarely. Typically, you're going to have, again, a quarter-page to a half-page article on these. Give them the schedule for your testing. When is your testing for the next 3 months? Always update them so they can plan ahead, so they make sure they're not out of town or don't schedule anything on your testing dates. Explain your testing process in your newsletter. So each month, go over just a little bit of your testing procedures to make sure that people understand. Now, you also want to discuss, how sparring works. So explain to them how they're going to get introduced to sparring. And then you also want to talk about the upgrade nomination process. So don't tell them everything about your upgrade program, how much it costs, what all's involved in it. But you want to educate parents on the nomination process for your upgrade programs. Now, there's some other things that we also need to put in our newsletter as well. One of those things is we want to resell the benefits of training at our martial arts school. So one of the ways to do that is through testimonials from students and parents about how they or how their child benefited from your program. Then we want to have some success stories. So these may not be a testimonial. This may be you telling the story about success of a current student or even a previous student. Like if you had someone become valedictorian or someone go off and join, the training academy at West Point for the military. So if you have some big success story, then, you can tell the story if it's a past story. You should also include articles about your monthly life lessons. So your word of the month, like if it's confidence or focus or discipline. So whatever your monthly life lessons are, you want to include an article about them as well. And these can cover your mental benefits, or these can be on physical benefits. So your life lessons can, again, be either physical or mental in nature. Now, you want to include students' names. If you want people to read your newsletter, which you do, then you need to include people's names in there. If my name is in the newsletter, then I'm going to look in the newsletter to see my name. My parents are going to read the newsletter to see my name. I might show that newsletter to my friends or other family members so that they can see my name. So you want to include things like the names of new students, the names of any people that are upgrading, that just recently upgraded. If you have any tournament results, those will be a good thing to put in there. If there's any volunteers that have reached any achievements, like if you have a SWAT team or demo team, or if any parents are helping out in a big way, any way that you can put somebody's name in there. Apologize, let me go back. One that's not on this list is every month you should include your students' birthdays as well. I don't know how that didn't make the list of the slideshow, but that should also be in there as well. Now, professionalism is the key when it comes to newsletters. Your newsletter, it's got to enhance your image in the community. These newsletters might go outside of your school and end up in places like, doctor's offices or chiropractors. I had my chiropractor and some of my parents that went to the chiropractic office, they would take our newsletter and he would put it in his lobby every month as reading material. So you never know where this is going to end up.